Hello everyone and welcome to another video. I've been wanting to do a in-depth spoiler talk for Warrior of the Altaii that will include its connections to the Wheel of Time, Robert Jordan as an author as a whole, and just go full on into it. If you're one of these people who has not read the book, has not read Wheel of Time, this video is not for you. Leave, we do not love you and we do not want you here. Yeah, there you go. And I figured there was no better person I could bring on to talk about this with than the man, you know him if you've been to JordanCon, you know him if you've been involved with the community, and that is Tom DeSimone. I said that right, correct?
DeSimone.
DeSimone. It's me and names, all right?
It's all good.
How's it going, Tom?
I'm doing pretty good. It was interesting reading the book.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of proto Wheel of Time stuff in there.
Yeah, I record a bit with Inking Out Loud, the podcast. Shout out to them. And the amount of times I said seeds of Wheel of Time in that podcast, it's unavoidable. There's so many things you're like, yeah, this obviously turned into the idea of, the spine of the world, turned into the idea of Aes Sedai. There's so much of that. But yes, this will be chock full of spoilers for Wheel of Time and Warrior of the Altaii. So get out of here if you haven't read it. What are your general thoughts on the book?
All right. So coming from like a standpoint of, I love Robert Jordan, and obviously I'm a huge Wheel of Time fan. I mean, I liked it. I liked seeing his voice again. Hearing his voice again in the words, and seeing like his early writing. You can really see how it evolved, like into the Wheel of Time. And I didn't read all his Conan stuff. I read a few of his Conan books, but see where it came from there. Coming at it from a different perspective, though, I mean, like, it was well written. It had, like you said in your other video, beginning, a middle, and end. It had a good arc to it. But it's very dated.
Mm-hmm.
I say this a lot, especially in a lot of the panels that I do, seeing everything from video games, movies, television, books. There's just a different level of fan now.
Yes.
And, this book is very 1970s fantasy. It doesn't delve into stuff that people like to see delved into today, backstories of things, where things come from, stuff like that. And it was very, for lack of a better term, chest beating, like very barbarian-y, like so.
Yeah, well, it was barbarian fantasy. That stuff's gonna be there.
So I'm not like, that's not something that I usually appeal to. So like an honest review would be, if you love the Wheel of Time and you love Robert Jordan, this book is, an awesome tidbit to see. But like, if you're just a big fantasy buff and you're into like current fantasy, it might not be a good book for you.
Now, have you read Robert Jordan's Conan books?
A couple of them, and a long time ago. Like,
okay,
probably more. When was the first? Oh, like more than 10 years ago. Man, I'm old.
For me, I still haven't read those. I'm a bad Robert Jordan fan. I haven't picked those up. Would you say this reminded you more of those from what you can remember, or more of the Wheel of Time?
Well, no, 100% more of the Conan. I mean, like, it's the voice of Wolfgar is pretty much Conan. Like that.
Mm-hmm. You can see how this led to being basically an audition for him being a Conan writer.
100%. I mean, I could see a little bit of Lan in there too, because he's like a little bit like wise and the same kind of like honorableness that Lan is, but he's still a little too rough.
And to me, he's a incredibly capable, maybe too capable, over the top Doc Savage approach. It was that, he's the everyman, he can do everything. But there were definite moments where Robert Jordan's talent in terms of making you love and relate to character really came through to me still. I talked about this in the podcast I was on, but there was a fantastic scene where Wolfgar basically has to he bends his knee and he accepts food from these people. And he's willing to just be like, yeah, I'll beg for food. I'll take it in this humiliating way, because he was smart enough to be like, this is worth it to then regain my strength and try to fight another day. Where I feel like if it was in a lesser author, they would have been like, no, I refuse. And it's like, yeah, that wouldn't be as, okay, this character's actually smart. This character's actually really understanding of what will benefit them down the road. And I can actually believe in their intelligence because they're making intelligent decisions.
Yeah, 100%. Like there was a little bit of, well, it always comes with Robert Jordan. There's a lot of realism in his stuff. Realism, he uses a lot, like obviously, if he wasn't eating and drinking, there had been no way he can escape. So he incorporated that into his wisdom and thinking, I need to do this in order to be able to get out, which that happens a lot in Robert Jordan stuff.
Yeah. One thing that shocked me was the lack of detail in some ways that certainly became a staple for Robert Jordan later on. I mean, he is one of these authors who is just detail, detail, detail. But Warrior of the Altai, I feel like almost all the terms of detail and effort in that like vein went towards world building.
Yeah.
But for me, there was very little detail in terms of like I don't know what every dress looked like. And someone who's coming from Wheel of Time, I was like, whoa, where are my 43 dresses that I need to know?
Yeah, there's no bodices here. I haven't
None.
seen one mention of lace. Nothing.
That's because most of the women are just naked.
Yeah, it's true. You're entirely accurate there. They were very naked, defeated, powerful women around for some reason.
It's a 70s male fantasy.
Yeah.
It's that coming through stronger than I've ever seen from this guy. But it wasn't a bad read. It wasn't overly grotesque or anything like that. It just definitely fit into that vein. But what was your biggest surprise with this one going on?
My biggest surprise was when I heard Michael Kramer say, "Need him in the crotch." Nah. Uh, uh, Surprise. I would say the Most High, the whole idea of the Most High was really interesting. For me personally, when it comes to any kind of entertainment at all, books, video games, movies, I really like interesting backstory. Like, where do things
Yeah,
come
correct.
from?
Fully
And
agree.
the idea of the Most High specifically were really cool. Like I think this is proto Aes Sedai, traveling stones, portal stones, alternate dimensions that feed in later into like the Age of Legends, their technology and stuff like that. So like to see that whole interaction with I don't know if I'm saying it right, like Cheshen and
Hmm.
Star at the end of the book when after they shoot the what do they call them, flying wagons or something
Hmm.
out of the sky, and he goes and approaches the Most High, and they have like that conversation. That entire conversation was my favorite part of the book. Just the two
I
of
can
them.
clearly see why. I mean that was to me where if I was reading this without knowing the Wheel of Time, it'd be something like, oh, this author can come up with big ideas. This author can come up with really creative stuff. That was what got me like, okay, there is the potential we're going to see realized later on because that kind of stuff was by far the most interesting bits we got from the book. The wider world building, the dimensional hopping going on, stuff like that is like that wouldn't be typical for normal sword and sorcery fantasy at the time. That was the seed for what was to come.
Yeah, there
Uh,
was Robert Jordan's genius, like in its early works, was right there. Was
yeah.
him touching on steampunky type things and futuristic tech and different, playing with the timelines of an advanced civilization going into a medieval type civilization was right in that. There was like 5 or 6 pages of conversation right there. It could have been, and that's a whole series. Like that could be an entire
Yeah.
series of books just based off of that one conversation.
Did you feel like this was set up for more books?
I felt like he left it. There's another thing that he was pretty good at, I guess, early before he got into Wheel of Time, because everyone knows Wheel of Time. Oh, it was originally going to be 3 books, then it was going to
Hmm.
be 5 books, then it was going to be 7, and then we ended up with 14. So, but where he left it, kind of, this is a standalone. It could easily be a standalone, one shot through, or
Hmm.
based off of like where he mentions at one point bigger cities than Lanta. Think it was like Liao and something else that the Altaii could be going to conquer next.
Hmm.
Uh, that could feed into like, do they come and try to defend Lanta? Did the Lantans go over there and try to get reinforcements? Like that could easily have done, but all at the same time, the way he wrapped it up, great standalone book. So
Hmm.
I think he had the idea, just like anyone marketing, like I would love to write here's my product. I hope you want more of it. If not, at least you took this one.
I get that and I agree with that. And honestly, that kind of ties into my biggest surprise with this book, though, and that was the ending. For me, the weakest part of this book was the ending because there's literally like it just feels like in the last 20 pages it just stumbles through and just like, all right, we're done. And there's some things where it's like there's a lot of information in like a half a page that's like a scene jump to jump, and I'm like, why wasn't this elaborated on? This should have been like a chapter. I think that at one point in the book there's 5 scene changes in 3 pages. And I'm like, what? No, I can't imagine how difficult that'd be on audiobook because you're just like, Wait, we're in a new thing. We're in a new thing again. Oh, it's a new thing now. At least when
It
I'm
was tough.
holding it, yeah. At least when I'm holding it, I can visually see new scene, new scene. But it was a bit nutty in that, and I was honestly kind of shocked because to me it was like a solid book till the very end, where all of a sudden it just kind of stumbled into this. Okay, wrap it up, summarize, summarize, and they're going off. That was kind of my biggest like, what happened? Did you just run out of energy, or like what was the cause here?
And I mean, like, if you look at the books that came out in the 70s, like not the big, like the more famous series, but the smaller stuff, because at this point you got to remember Robert Jordan was nobody. Like
Right.
he wasn't going to be writing a 5, 6 book series. He was just going to be pushing out,
Trying to get published.
yeah, yeah. So like this is pretty much on par. Like the length of this book was pretty much on par with what was available at the time. So I feel like it could have been him just trying to conform to
Mm,
the standards of the fantasy at the time.
that's a really good point. That's a really good point. See, I don't have quite that context. I've read some fantasy from that era, but I'm certainly not knowledgeable enough to be like, here are the publishing standards of fantasy in the
Yeah.
70s.
I mean, like I've only read, I don't know, maybe like 15 or 20 books published, prior 1980s, but like that's pretty much what they were. They were very, they weren't deep.
Mm,
Is a word that I like to use for, especially for Wheel of Time, is deep. Like there's a lot of hidden meaning. There's a lot of stuff buried in those pages and in the words that he writes that allude to thousands of other stories and times.
mm.
Where in those fantasies of that time were very just what's on the page. Like, this is what you're getting.
That kind of transfers over to another huge surprise for me for this one, and that it's written in the first person,
Oh yeah,
which I would have never in a million billion years thought we'd have a first person Robert Jordan book, because that just feels so antithetical to what he later became. Did you like that? Do you think that was handled well?
I mean, like it was okay. I read a lot of other first person books too,
Mm,
so it's not that jarring. Um, but for him, like he did it well. He's done it better than he did it better than other authors that I've read.
mhm.
It's definitely very different for him hearing his writing voice coming through in a first person view. It felt weird. It took a
Yeah.
little while to get used to, especially Michael Kramer reading.
Yeah, yeah. It's for me like the gold standard for first person to me is Dresden Files. That is like, okay, this is like how it should be done. It helps every bit of the story. Then there's other books that just do it well, and this to me wasn't on that level of like it doesn't bother me because I still don't like first person. I just don't like it as much as third person limited. But it was well enough handled that it didn't hinder me from enjoying it.
Yeah.
That's pretty much all I can say. Just I don't know why, but something about every time a book starts going I'm like, stop it.
I kind of like the only thing I could say that I like more about first person than third person limited is, as a reader you have to realize that the information you're getting is being filtered through this person,
Mm-hmm.
so it could be inaccurate and it could be wrong.
Mm-hmm.
So it's interesting to see when they flip that around, like when a writer uses that
Mm-hmm.
against the reader, essentially. Like you thought you understood this, but X characters is the one that understood this, and you read it in their point of view.
Yeah.
Which actually lets me go into a point that I was thinking about for when I was reading the book, which
Sure.
was there's and specifically the scene when oh yeah, by the way, I have notes. That's how much there's bullet points. Anyway,
I respect it.
Cheshen, when they're talking, he is aware. He makes reference that he's aware of the Sisters of Wisdom's magic. He knows that they do things. Wolfgar tells him that he's wearing the trinket. He knows that it did something he tried to use a box on him and it malfunctioned.
Mm-hmm.
Wolfgar tells him that it also tells him if Cheshen is telling the truth. We have a point of view from Wolfgar where he says, he knows that he just made that up, but Cheshen believes him.
Right.
So then Cheshen says, specifically, I wrote it down, I'll answer truthfully as best I can. If that thing says my answer is wrong, it's because what I think isn't true. Remember that and don't do anything hasty. So I think that's an early reference to the three O's, like, and I said I can lie if what they are saying they believe to be true, but it's inaccurate. That's still a lie, but in their heart they believe it to be true.
Absolutely.
So,
There's so many of those things,
Yeah.
so much where it's just like that's an early inkling. That was one where I actually didn't make that connection you did right there, but that I don't. I think you're absolutely right. I think that is something like that where it just lines up. And I actually okay, the magic system here as a whole didn't feel Jordan-esque to me at all,
No, not at all.
except for okay, women use it, and men aren't. It's women's business, which is very Jordan. And there's that, but outside of that, it was so soft. It was so not defined, which probably is something to do with the page constrictions as well. But I just this to me was just this mushy gushy magic system of oh, this person doesn't speak our language, bibbity boppity boop. Now they do.
Lord of the Rings magic system where it's just like, oh, there's a problem, magic solves it.
Yeah.
How does it happen? It's magic.
Which is just fantasy of the time. You know, hard magic
Yeah.
systems evolved later on, but I found it to be jarring. I didn't expect that. For some reason, I went into this, and one of the things I did expect was to find a new, awesome magic system, and I most definitely never. It was just magic. There's no system. It was just magic.
Yeah. And speaking from a like to go back to like, you know, if you'll like it if you're a Jordan fan, that it was one of the main things I was really looking forward to was seeing maybe like a proto you know, a one power magic
Yeah.
system, and there was nothing. There's just no system at all. It's just vague references to spells that they can do,
Yeah.
and then how they like what the spells accomplish, not into how or why in any way.
If you're a Wheel of Time fan, you won't necessarily by default love this book,
No.
but you will probably at least be fascinated to see where all these ideas came from, because there is certainly enough of those things in there. Especially how Robert Jordan writes combat is completely different here. Like we're not doing barbarian sword forms. It's just he takes his head, he crushes it. You know what I mean? It's that kind of thing. And
There's the one scene where he's fighting the assassin. It gets very like, and then he lifted his sword and thrust this way, and I moved my sword down and blocked it with the butt of my blade. Like that's completely contrary to later Wheel of Time stuff, and that it was very weird.
I was just realized how far away my mic was from my face, and that probably sounded horrible.
No, it was so different to later stuff. The way he was just like, I lifted my sword and then lowered it, and he came in with a thrust toward my ribs, and I blocked it with the flat of my blade. It was just very different than the, you know, describing the sword forms and more of like a, while at the same time being less detailed, more like visual, I guess, for like the sword forms.
Yeah.
Lifting the sword up at waist height vertically, and like, I hate when they get way too into that stuff. We don't need to know that.
Yeah, I completely agree with that, and I can tell why he most likely like did that. Why he eventually traded off to going into just sword forms. Here's the cat crosses the courtyard. Whatever, done.
Exactly.
Problem solved.
it's especially, that's a perfect example too. The cat crosses the what is it? The cat crosses the yard.
Courtyard.
Yeah. No, the courtyard, right? What is that? Like 15 words. Like if you like, depending on like where you place it in a sentence, and it conveys a perfect mental image of what somebody is doing. Like you can easily picture a cat sauntering across a courtyard, like, you know, kind of cocky almost a little bit, with like, you know, but with grace, without having to actually write, he crossed the courtyard like a cocky, you know, like it's perfect. He really evolved with that from where he started, it looks like, in Warrior.
And I think it falls into the philosophy of let the reader's imagination take it where we go. Because even in the more like, actually this is an attack sword form, like I think there's one that's like bulls rush down the mountain or something. Okay, I get the idea that there's some kind of hella strong blow coming from down up top, and that's what he's going for. I don't need to know his hand was at a 45-degree angle as he, you know, that's.
I hate that. So it's nothing takes you out of a story, like out of a moment, than unnecessary description like that.
But back on the topic. We're good. So
I'm good at steering people away from topic. Sorry.
That's the point of this. I want this to be as loose as possible. When it comes to Warrior of the Altaii, what other like big Wheel of Time connections stood out to you? Because there's so many.
Other than the obvious, like the Spine of the World and the Sisters of Wisdom and stuff like that, I really liked seeing the early Aiel in the people, I guess the tribes of the plains, I don't remember all of the names. There's the Marasa, the Altaii, or the Altaii. And there's something with an E. I forgot. It's like Elokai or Echo something or other.
I read it, so don't look to me at pronunciations.
Yeah, no, it's just a long. It's a long. It was a long word with an E. There's multi. It seems like there's multiple tribes on the plains, and that's an easy early reference to the Aiel and their societies. It also felt a little. I mean, and again, this is just coming like if you were looking at it with just the eye of the Wheel of Time, is like a little Shawnee, the way their society is built. They have the ruling, they take people slaves. They have like a ruling like family almost in the way that the people rule. They can challenge each other, it seemed like, in their rule. It was interesting.
And especially the superiority complex of a couple rulers in particular.
Yeah.
That felt very Emperor Shan Chan. Yeah, I get that there as well. Now that you say that, that's a good point. Every fantasy author I've talked to who has made or developed a decent culture, they spend more time reading history textbooks than they do other fantasy, because they're trying to craft something new. They're trying to pull from as many examples as they can, and that just ends up with them having to read like, okay, how did the Aztecs build their temples, and how did the Zulu warriors prepare for warfare, and how, that's how you get that rich, detailed culture when you're able to look at all these different things and just kind of build something that feels so new but is so rooted in our world. That's perfect. That's the way to go.
One of the things that I really liked was the when, again, back to the conversation with again, I'm probably saying it hardly, Cheshen or whatever, where he was talking about where the Wanderers come from. And this is back to your question before about, could it have been multiple books? Easy, like especially just the like 2 paragraphs where he talks about how the Altaii are also wanderers from a different place. Like all of the people other than the Most High that are on this planet aren't from this planet. So that's huge. Like that could be anything. Now it's Wolfgar has to discover where he comes from, and like where does everyone come from, and why are we here? And like that's a whole series by itself. Like tracking back to the original world that they come from, and then finding a way for men to get there instead of just women.
I would say that's Tolkien-esque. That's a bit of that influence coming in, where Tolkien's a master of just leaving a paragraph that has implications for like a century's worth of history. And Jordan loved that as well, and that echoes throughout all of his works. And I think that is just I love that's one of my favorite things for a fantasy author to do, is to give me a couple paragraphs that lead to much greater implications of a prior world. That is how you build a fantasy world without just massive exposition dumps. You just give a paragraph that has implications for so much more. Such great things. Love that.
That's what keeps me frothing at the mouth for stuff like this. It's just like, where, why, how? I need to know, but at the same time, like I don't really want to necessarily know. I like having the imagination, of where this comes from. Some of the time is the Isle of Madmen.
Yeah. Oh, we never got anything with that.
I know. I'm just like, oh my God.
Yeah, I completely agree. See, but you're the kind of person who doesn't want answers. I'm the kind of person I want answers. Give me those answers.
It's one of those things where it's like, oh, I want the answers, but then at the same time, like after you get them, it's great that you have them, if they're good or not, depending. But then it's like it's over, like that's what keeps Wheel of Time alive for me. Like I've reread the series a lot. The last 2 books maybe only like 6 or 7 times, but from Eye of the World to Crossroads of Twilight, like more than 20 times. Is those paragraphs that it's just like, and then we found this in the ground, or like it was the Mercedes symbol and the Tyrannosaurus Rex bones and the Triceratops bones. Like, holy crap! Like, I want to know. That's what keeps it alive for me. That's how we can still have these theory panels and stuff like that, and have discussions with people, and that is my favorite part of the Wheel of
Time. Okay, back Warrior of the Altaii.
Sorry, there was another Robert Jordan book that we're supposed to be talking about. What was it? The other part from that conversation is when he goes into taking beings from other dimensions.
Yeah.
That was pretty cool. Like that's like specifically they were actually not just they just so happened to show up like they do now. It was them forcefully reaching into those other dimensions and pulling them out. And then he says specifically, what was it? Notes again. They found a being that was strong enough to resist the pull, and in one day destroyed all civilization on the planet. So like that's obviously like an early idea for the breaking of the world and stuff like that. But
See, in my head, I was like, okay, they found the Dark One. They didn't, but in my head, they did.
that could easily be what that was.
It
100%.
was. It's an early idea for the boar. It's an early idea for the breaking of the world. Um, and this entire book, I was sitting there going, "This is Shara. The ending of this is going to reveal to be Shara," and then it wasn't. And I was like, "Damn, it's
It
not
is down
Shara."
in my head. My head canon. This is Shard.
Yeah, and so we have a lot of connections there. But one thing I would want to bring up is how did you like the handling of the imprisonment and the torture and the attempted breaking of Wolfgar? Because our main character, he has a bit of let's call it a sort of truth moment, where a large part of the book, yeah, a large part of the book, he's thrown into imprisonment and abused and tortured. Obviously, it doesn't turn into weird cytosexual stuff. It doesn't turn into over-the-top graphic weird things. It's just, I found it to have that same Robert Jordan dissonance where horrible things are happening, but he writes it in a way where you as the reader are not like, ugh, like you're not so in it that it
You're left
sucks.
to build it in your mind, which in some cases could be worse.
Exactly. It's depending on the reader.
Yeah. I honestly I felt it was a little I don't want to use the word fake, but it didn't feel genuine. Just the way it was. He never really experiences any true break. I feel like he is strong Wolfgar through the whole thing.
Yeah.
I felt like it would have been more interesting to see like an emotional or mental kind of like deterioration as well, a little bit, just for as a reader, like not that I want to see that happen because that's
Right.
horrible, but like it just felt not genuine. Where like I feel like anybody would have a break at some point, or at least a doubt something. Like he doesn't have to break, but maybe doubt or have any kind of fear at any point. He doesn't. He's the whole time. He's just 100%. I'm gonna break out. I'm gonna be fine. Everything's gonna be great. And
I agree with you, and the only reason it didn't bother me more is when the girl starts visiting him and
yeah,
giving him some kind of reprieve. For me, I interpreted that as he was about to break, because you know how they say like the stiffest board will snap suddenly, and I feel like he was at that point, and then he started getting those visits, the food, and I feel like that is where okay we can excuse it but realistically he should have already been broken because any person if I skip a meal someone might die like so for him to go days and days and days and have no issue,
yeah.
that felt a little like
I just he added more. He could have added a little bit more detail into that, just to make you really feel his. I didn't feel where like in some of the in the Wheel of Time stuff. Like you can really feel what these characters are feeling sometimes emotionally. Rand and Perrin and Matt when they're going through their horrible. Like one of my favorite scenes in Perrin is when Bran tells him that his family's dead, and he like it doesn't register to him immediately, but then he just starts like he crushes a cup in his hand and doesn't realize that he did it, and like he's apologized. You can really feel that like that emotion that he's feeling, where I didn't really have that almost at all in this entire book, where I never felt it myself, like the emotion of any of the characters.
Yeah, I can agree with that. And I also really wanted, so if you're starving someone, the descriptions of hunger need to be vivid because that becomes basically if you're starving, that's all you can think about. It becomes you as a person is hunger.
Yeah.
It resorts to that animalistic, and we didn't get that. Anyone can't avoid that. I mean, that's not a will thing. That is a biological. If you are starving, your brain just reduces everything down to food. It felt a little too Doc Savage, a little too nothing's actually wrong. This guy's perfect. He can handle it for me.
That's a great example, Doc.
Yeah.
Could it be he was still learning, or could it be time constraints, or was it too? Did he get feedback like this is too high-brained for fantasy? Like dumb it down. Who knows?
That's one of my biggest complaints with just like reviewing final products, which my job is. I review final products. Is I would kill for so many books just to see what the editor's notes were. How much of this was the author, and how much of it was no, their publisher, their editor, whoever said you got to change this, that, and this. Obviously, the editor here is Harriet, I believe, for this one as well. Correct?
Well, you know what? No, not the early book, because he wrote it way before.
True. Right.
For the final product that we got, yes, I'm
Yeah,
sure Harriet and Maria and Alan, and I'm sure others too, edited this that we
that
got.
makes sense. Yeah.
But the original story, no, because he didn't know Harriet when
We
he
met
first.
her in the process. That was
Yeah,
yeah.
after he sold it though, he had sold it, and a
Right.
company bought it, and they talk
But it
about that.
hadn't been published.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he
Okay.
had a final copy of this book that he completely wrote, and I don't know if he had it edited by someone professionally or he did it uh, prior to knowing Harry.
Mhm.
I don't know if this version of it is the same. You know what? I'm gonna ask Harriet that at Jordan Con. Different is this Warriors of Altaii to the Warriors of Altaii that Robert Jordan
Yeah.
tried to publish, prior to meeting you? That's a question I want to have an answer to.
So if someone handed you this book and didn't tell you it was by Robert Jordan, do you think reading it you would go, this is someone massively influenced by Robert Jordan, or this reads like Jordan? Would you pick that up? Or would it be it's too different, you wouldn't make that connection?
If me myself,
Yes.
I would definitely pick up that it was Robert Jordan. I mean, again, I don't. I think I would, only because I've read so much of him,
Hmm.
uh, and so often that I'm so familiar with his voice. Which is a problem that I had with some of the later books. I was able to kind of, oh, this is definitely Brandon voice, and this is definitely a Jordan voice. It took me out a little bit, and it took some getting used to before I was able to dive into the story to get past that. But I think I'd be able to notice his voice in this writing.
That makes sense. Yeah, I thought so too. And then I talking with the Inking Out Loud guys, they put some doubts in there. I'd like to think I could, especially with some of the early on things where I would go, man, this seems like an early form of Aes Sedai. Man, this seems like there'd be influence from like Sean Chen here, because that stuff I think would stand out to me regardless. And I think in terms of atmosphere, it read like Wheel of Time a lot. But especially it being first person, that big stylistic change, I think would make it very difficult in some ways to say this is Jordan's writing.
I don't know if I'd be able to pick out if you know what you're probably right from what you said before. I don't know if I'd be able to pick out if it was him or someone heavily influenced by him.
Yeah.
But you could see Robert Jordan in this writing if you're familiar with Robert Jordan. I mean, I've been reading The Wheel of Time for, damn it, I'm old, for like 20 years. So like 20, how old am I? Yeah. So going into, yeah, so like 21 years I've been reading Robert Jordan. So uh, I think I would be able to spot at least his influence in this writing, if not
Okay.
directly.
I like to think in my review I was able to distance myself from Wheel of Time to give an objective opinion, where I said if you like barbaric fantasy, check it out. If you like Robert Jordan, check it out. But in terms of if you're a big fantasy fan right now who's not interested in past fantasy, I don't know if this is for you. There's other things you need to be reading. I feel like that's fair. But this is by no means bad. I wouldn't say it's bad. It shows it's like mining. There are veins of really great stuff. There's gold in those mines. But there's also some just like, yeah, this could have been handled better, especially the ending.
It's very pulpy, and it's very face value on what you get out of the book. Coming from just like if I was a 20-something-year-old kid that had no big standing in the fantasy world, I just read books. This probably wouldn't, especially today, like right now, it wouldn't stand out as like a good book. Like I wouldn't be like, oh, I'll read this book.
Yeah, it wouldn't be. It's not. This being released now, it's not going to be received like Lightbringer. It's not going to be received like a Mistborn. But I do stand by. If this was released when it was written in the '70s, I think it would have been critically well received.
Oh yeah, I could easily see this becoming like Wolfgar and Conan, like next to each other, in bookstores and stuff like that.
Especially with the level of world building that's happening here, which wasn't common for the time. I feel like I could have found an audience easily with people who were really interested to see larger world building.
I mean, I had the list of the interesting technology that they had, but the main one. Okay, here we go. We definitely see early shadow spawn in this book. So there's the assassin that Wolfgar fights.
Oh, Greyman.
Yeah, either Greyman, Murdril, or Gollum even.
Yeah.
Because he ignores. He gets injured, but he completely ignores the injuries like they're not even happening. So that's kind of like where the gray men react to when they got injured in the scenes, not as much as a person would, but they still reacted. And they seem to have I know they coin them as emotionless, but they smile and stuff like that. Where this, nothing, this guy, no reaction whatsoever to damage at all. and it felt like Golem to me a little bit.
Yeah,
Um,
I can see that absolutely. God, why didn't I pick up on that? Damn it. Yeah, I see what you're saying there. There's also the beasts from the other world.
yeah, yep, those are from all the different worlds or dimensions or whatever. But they specifically talk about how the Most High can affect people's minds,
Hmm.
and obviously that's what they did to this person. Like they worked and experimented on him in some way that they made this person. I know uh, Wolfgar actually does specifically say he doesn't think that the Most High were responsible for sending this assassin, but from like I'm 100% sure that, or at least I feel like that's who sent this assassin or who created this assassin. I mean,
At least created.
yeah, he's inhuman. Like he's
Yeah.
not human, and the other peoples I just don't think are capable of doing things like this. Especially because they specifically mention like 10 or 12 times that the Most High can affect men's minds. They can
Yeah.
make them fight each other and do crazy things. So I think that this was early Shadow Spawn experimentation here.
And that just makes me wish the magic system was more fleshed out, so we had more to debate there and discuss, like, oh, where could it have come from? But now it's all so vague. You know, we have
Yeah.
no
Was
idea.
it the magic or was it their weird technology? You know, like who
Yeah.
knows? Because they have those power staffs that when Wolfgar shoots it with the arrow, it's obviously an electronic.
Yeah.
It sparks and hisses and has a blue acrid flame, which is electronic.
Yeah.
So
And okay, this is one of my. We're gonna end here on a nitpick. This is my big nitpick. They're saying the Most High affect people's minds and how amazing, powerful it is. Right at the beginning, we have someone who makes a woman forget her languages and learn another language on the spot. And for me, I'm just like, that's super powerful. Like that's amazing mind manipulation. And you're telling me that only the Most High can do that
yeah,
level stuff? You just casually had some woman be like, oh yeah, she knows English. Like that's
and like 2 seconds too.
yeah.
It's like I'm gonna just wipe your entire memory of everything and input an entire language into your brain in like a paragraph.
Yeah. And I did like the details though, where she didn't know like if her language had a word for something that ours didn't, she
Yeah,
would just freeze and be like, I have no idea. That was great. That was
yeah,
a cool little detail there. Yeah, that's pretty much everything I have to say about Warrior of the Altai. How about yourself, Tom?
yeah. That's
Good.
yeah, that's pretty good. That pretty much covers everything that I felt about it.
Yeah. Sorry, everyone, for getting so off topic, but I'm sure you enjoyed it in actuality. I sure did. If you have not already, be sure to check out Jordan Con online. I'm sure people will be discussing this book, Wheel of Time. There's also a lot of Cosmere talk. Dresden Files seems to have a large following there as well. Absolutely stellar place to be. I cannot promote it enough. Tom is also a part of the Dragon Mount YouTube channel. Please be sure to check that out as well. Thank you so much for coming on, man.
Thanks, man. Thanks for having me. I'm thrilled to be here.